I've always believed that numbers told the truth. Unlike people, they don't hide motives, they don't flinch, and they certainly don't lie. As the CEO of Tech Vision Enterprises, one of the world's most powerful tech conglomerates, I built an empire on that principle. My name is Alexander Reed, and for 20 years, I've lived and breathed data, algorithms, and profit margins. Days blurred into nights. Boardroom walls became more familiar than my own home, and my mind was a constant spreadsheet of deadlines, profits, and projections. My corner office on the 47th floor of our Boston headquarters offered a panoramic view of the city skyline that few ever stopped to admire, myself included. Most mornings, I'd watch the sun rise over the harbor while reviewing strategy documents, not because I appreciated the beauty, but because I was already there when it happened. My assistant, Margaret, once joked that I should install a cot in my office to save myself the commute from my Beacon Hill townhouse. I didn't tell her I'd actually considered it. I arrived at the office that Sunday like I always did, before sunrise, coffee in hand from Sullivan's down the street, already calculating the week ahead. The security guard, Ron, barely raised an eyebrow when I swiped my badge at 5:47 a.m. We had long since stopped exchanging pleasantries beyond a silent nod. The weekend cleaning crew was still making rounds, the scent of lemon polish hanging in the air. I didn't notice the unusual silence of the hallways or the stillness of the elevators. My mind was already on the quarterly financial reports, particularly the concerning anomaly in Division 3. Division 3 was our R&D department, where we developed next-generation AI systems. The numbers weren't adding up in a way that bothered me. Not because we were losing money, quite the opposite. Someone had entered adjustments that didn't make sense, yet strangely, they worked. They corrected an error no one else had noticed. An error that, had it gone undetected, would have tanked our most promising project and potentially cost us billions. The correction was elegant, almost beautiful in its simplicity. I settled at my desk, the skyline still dark behind me, and pulled up the network activity logs. Who would have access to these systems? More importantly, who had the mathematical insight to spot something even I had missed? I checked login credentials, timestamps, IP addresses. The trail led to an internal server access point on the 32nd floor, our main conference room, at 4:13 a.m. this morning. But the credentials belonged to an employee ID that didn't exist in our system. This wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Our security protocols were designed by the best in the business, by me. No one got into our systems without leaving a trace. No one could create phantom credentials. I should have called security. I should have initiated our breach protocols. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I needed to see the conference room for myself. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt longer than usual. My reflection in the polished doors showed a man I barely recognized anymore. Hair more gray than brown, lines etched around my eyes that hadn't been there a decade ago. A perpetual furrow between my brows from years of scrutinizing data. When had I aged so much? When had I last taken a vacation? Seen a movie? Had dinner with someone who wasn't a client or investor? The 32nd floor was completely silent. The motion sensor lights flickered on as I walked down the corridor, casting my shadow long against the wall. The glass conference room door was slightly ajar, a thin strip of light spilling onto the hallway carpet. I slowed my pace, listening. The soft squeak of a marker against whiteboard. Quiet muttering. Someone was inside. I pushed the door open, expecting to find an ambitious intern or an overstepping analyst burning the midnight oil. What I found instead defied all logic, all reason. A little girl, no older than 10, stood on a chair, scribbling furiously on our digital whiteboard. Complex equations filled the surface, algorithms I recognized from our most classified projects. She was small, with dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a faded MIT sweatshirt that hung to her knees. Her sneakers, I noticed absurdly, lit up with each movement as she shifted her weight on the chair. She didn't notice me at first. She was too focused, her brows knit in deep concentration, her tongue slightly poking out of the corner of her mouth as she wrestled with a particularly complex formula. I stood frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How had a child gotten into our building? How did she know these equations? And why did the solution she was working toward look so familiar, like something I might have done myself? The girl stepped back, surveyed her work, and made a small, satisfied sound before making one final adjustment to a variable. She had solved it. She had fixed the very error I'd been puzzling over. And she'd done it with an elegance that, frankly, surpassed my own approach. "Who taught you this?" I asked, my voice slicing through the silence. My words came out harsher than intended, edged with disbelief. She didn't jump. She didn't panic. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a calm far too old for her face. They were dark brown, intelligent, and somehow familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "Mom did," she said, almost like a whisper, like the wind brushing through a forgotten memory. Then came the blow that stopped my breath. "You forgot about us, didn't you?" The marker slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor in the sudden, deafening silence. Her words didn't make sense until they did. My mind staggered through a fog of possibilities, frantically trying to find ground. I bent down to pick up the fallen marker, buying myself precious seconds to compose my thoughts. When I straightened, she was still watching me, those brown eyes unflinching, patient in a way children rarely are. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "When was the last time I'd apologized to anyone? But I don't think we've met." She sighed, a heavy, adult sound that seemed strange coming from such a small person. "Mom said you might say that." She hopped down from the chair and walked toward me, extending a small hand. "I'm Sophia. Sophia Ramirez Reed. My last name." She had my last name. I looked at her face again, this time really looked. There was something familiar in her eyes, her cheekbones, the way her bottom lip quivered when she was thinking. The numbers on the board disappeared. All I could see was her. "How did you get in here?" I asked, still unable to process what she was implying. Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out a security badge. My security badge. But it wasn't mine. The photo was of a woman with the same dark curly hair as Sophia, the same intelligent eyes. Her name read, Isabel Ramirez, consulting mathematician. "Mom's old badge still works," she said, shrugging. "She said the system never really forgets anything. Just like people shouldn't." Isabel. The name hit me like a physical blow. Isabel Ramirez. A name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. A name I'd trained myself not to think about. Memories came crashing down, unfiled, unfiltered. A woman I once loved. A time before I buried myself in boardrooms. A goodbye that had felt too abrupt. I had convinced myself that chapter was closed. But the evidence was standing in front of me, flesh and blood, holding a marker like a wand, and wielding knowledge that no child should possess. "How old are you?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. 9 3/4. She said it precisely, the way I would have. "My birthday is January 17th. I did the math quickly. 10 years ago, right after Isabel and I had parted ways. My knees felt suddenly weak, and I lowered myself into one of the conference room chairs. "Mom didn't want me to come," Sophia continued, sitting across from me, her feet dangling above the floor. "But I saw the news about TechVision's new quantum computing project. The one that's going to fail if you don't fix the error in your base algorithm." My head snapped up. "How do you know about that project?" "Those details aren't public." She rolled her eyes, another gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "Mom used to work on the early versions. She recognized the architecture in the press release photos. Said it still had the same flaw you two argued about years ago." I remembered that argument. Isabel had insisted my approach was too rigid, that it wouldn't scale properly when quantum computing finally caught up to our theoretical models. I dismissed her concerns as overly cautious. And now, a decade later, she was being proven right. "So you just decided to break into one of the most secure buildings in Boston to fix my math?" I asked, a hint of my usual skepticism returning. Sophia's expression clouded. "I didn't break in. I used Mom's badge. And I wasn't trying to fix your math. I was trying to see if..." She trailed off, suddenly looking like the child she was. Vulnerable. Uncertain. "Trying to see what?" "If you were real." Her voice was small now. "If you look like your pictures. Mom doesn't keep many. Just one in her desk that she thinks I don't know about." The weight of her words pressed down on me. This child, my child, had been curious enough about me to commit what essentially amounted to corporate espionage. Just to see if I was real. Because all she had was a single hidden photograph. "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked, suddenly realizing the potential panic Isabel must be feeling if she woke to find her daughter missing. Sophia shook her head. "She's at a conference in Chicago." The neighbor is watching me, but Mrs. Peterson sleeps really heavily. I'll be back before she wakes up. You came here alone? At 4 in the morning? From where? Cambridge. We live near Harvard Square. I took the red line and then walked. I nearly choked. You took the subway alone? At night. She gave me a look that was pure Isabel, part amusement, part exasperation. I'm almost 10, and I had mom's pepper spray, and I know how to use the emergency call buttons. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process all of this. My daughter, the concept was still so foreign I could barely think it, had navigated Boston's public transportation system in the middle of the night to break into my company and correct a mathematical error that would have cost billions. All while her mother was out of town. Part of me was horrified. Another part was grudgingly impressed. The sun was beginning to rise now, casting long golden rectangles across the conference table. It caught in Sophia's hair, highlighting streaks of auburn I hadn't noticed before. My mother's hair color. My throat tightened. We should call your neighbor, I said finally. And then I should take you home. Are you mad? She asked, and for the first time, she sounded uncertain, like the child she actually was. Was I mad? I was many things at that moment. Shocked, confused, terrified by the implications of what she was telling me. But mad? No, that emotion was notably absent. I'm not mad, I said carefully. I'm surprised, and we have a lot to talk about. But first, we need to make sure your neighbor knows you're safe. Relief spread across her small features. She won't be awake for hours, and I already solved your problem. She gestured to the whiteboard. Don't you want to know how? I looked at the board again, at the elegant solution she'd crafted. It was brilliant, a perfect integration of quantum mathematics and classical algorithms. It would work. I knew it instantly, the way I always knew when numbers aligned perfectly. Yes, I said, finding myself genuinely curious. I would like to know how. Sophia's face lit up, and she bounced to her feet, eager to walk me through her process. As she began to explain, using terms and concepts that graduate students would struggle with, I felt something shift inside me. A door opening to a room I didn't know existed. A space where pride and wonder could coexist with regret and missed opportunities. I had a daughter. A brilliant, fearless, slightly reckless daughter who had my mathematical instincts and Isabel's determined spirit. A daughter who had crossed the city alone just to see if I was real. The numbers on the board blurred as my eyes unexpectedly filled. For the first time in my adult life, the equations weren't the most important thing in the room. Her mother, Isabel. The name echoed in my mind as I drove Sophia back to Cambridge in my rarely used Tesla. The girl had fallen asleep within minutes of buckling her seatbelt, exhausted from her night adventure. In the quiet of the car, with the Boston skyline receding in my rearview mirror, memories I'd locked away for a decade came flooding back. We met at MIT. I was finishing my PhD in computational mathematics. She was starting hers in theoretical physics. The graduate student lounge in the math department had the best coffee on campus, and Isabel would slip in to steal a cup before her morning classes. I noticed her the third time she did it. Not just because she was beautiful, with those dark curls and sharp eyes, but because she was reading a paper I'd published in an obscure mathematical journal. She was annotating it, marking errors in my reasoning. You've got a problem with your boundary conditions, she said when she caught me staring. No introduction, no small talk. Just straight to the mathematical flaw no one else had caught. I was both irritated and intrigued. I joined her that morning, and we argued for 2 hours about mathematical approaches until we were both late for our respective classes. The next day, she was back, with more questions, more challenges. Within a week, it became our ritual. Within a month, we were inseparable. Isabel was as brilliant as she was grounded, a mathematician with the heart of an artist. She could see patterns where others saw chaos, find elegant solutions to problems that had stumped researchers for years. But unlike me, she didn't live entirely in her mind. She painted. She cooked elaborate meals. She danced salsa on Saturday nights at a small club in Central Square where the locals gathered. She dragged me there once, laughing as I stiffly tried to follow the rhythm. "You're thinking too hard," she'd whispered, pressing her hand against my chest. "Mathematics is in the head. Dancing is in the heart. Feel it." I never did get the hang of salsa, but I fell in love watching her dance. The joy on her face, the freedom in her movements, so different from the careful precision she applied to her equations. We were in love, deeply. We moved into a small apartment in Porter Square after graduation, starting our careers in adjacent fields. I launched my first tech startup. She consulted for research institutions. Our tiny kitchen table was always covered with papers, laptops, coffee mugs. We'd work late into the night, challenging each other's ideas, building on each other's insights. Those were the happiest years of my life, though I didn't recognize it then. I was already chasing visions of empires, while she spoke of balance, of having a life we didn't need to run away from. There's more to existence than achievement, she'd say, pulling me away from my computer to watch the sunset from our roof. I'd go reluctantly, always half thinking about work, about the next milestone. The first major fracture came when my startup, the precursor to TechVision, secured series of funding. Suddenly, I had investors, expectations, a board to answer to. 14-hour days became 18-hour days. I missed dinners, weekend plans, her doctoral defense. I was building something important, I told myself. Isabel would understand. She always had. But somewhere along the line, I chose ambition over everything else. The Porter Square apartment became just a place to occasionally sleep. Isabel's voice became a background noise to the symphony of success I was composing. I stopped arguing with her about mathematics. I didn't have time for theoretical debates anymore. I was changing the world with practical applications. Our last conversation had ended with the words, "You're not the man I fell in love with." We were standing in our kitchen, a space that had once been the heart of our shared life, but had grown cold with disuse. I had just canceled our anniversary trip to Barcelona. The third year in a row, I'd broken a promise to her. "I can't keep waiting for you to remember that life exists outside your company," she'd said, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. "I can't keep loving someone who doesn't have room for love anymore." I told her she was wrong. I told her I had no choice. There was too much at stake. The company was at a critical juncture. Millions of dollars on the line. Hundreds of employees depending on me. "There's always a choice, Alex," she'd said quietly. "You're just making the wrong one." The next day, I came home to find her things gone. A note on the table with her parents' address in Arizona, where she said she'd be staying until she found a new place. I never called. I never answered when she reached out in the weeks that followed. I told myself it was cleaner this way. A surgical removal of the one distraction that was keeping me from achieving my full potential. And eventually, she stopped trying. 2 months later, TechVision secured its Series B funding, valuing the company at over $1 billion. I bought the Beacon Hill townhouse as a celebration, though I barely spent any time there. In my mind, the sacrifice had been worth it. I had proven Isabel wrong. I had made the right choice. Now, looking at the sleeping child beside me, Sophia, my daughter, I realized the magnitude of what I had lost, what I had missed. Not just birthdays or school plays, but the quiet moments, the lessons, the laughter, the tiny, beautiful miracles of being a father. I pulled up to the address Sophia had given me, a modest brownstone in a leafy part of Cambridge. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor, had been predictably frantic when I called. She was waiting on the porch, a gray-haired woman in a bathrobe who rushed to the car as soon as I parked. "She's fine," I assured her, gently waking Sophia. "Just fell asleep on the ride home." "And who exactly are you?" Mrs. Peterson asked suspiciously, pulling Sophia protectively toward her once the girl had groggily climbed out of the car. Before I could answer, Sophia said, "He's my dad, Mrs. P. Remember? The one from the picture Mom keeps." The woman's face registered shock, then something like anger. She looked me up and down, taking in my expensive suit, my carefully curated appearance. "Well," she said coldly, "you certainly took your time showing up. I deserve that. I deserved much worse." "It's complicated," I said lamely. "Is Isabel really in Chicago?" "Mathematics conference. Back tomorrow night." Mrs. Peterson's tone made it clear she didn't think I deserved this information. "Sophia, honey, go inside and get some sleep. I need to have a word with your father." Sophia looked between us, suddenly alert despite her exhaustion. "Are you going to be here when I wake up?" she asked me, and the vulnerability in her voice made my chest physically hurt. I looked at her hopeful face, at the house that held the life Isabel had built without me, at the neighbor who clearly thought I was the scum of the earth. "I'll come back this afternoon," I promised. "We have more to talk about." She nodded solemnly and headed inside after giving Mrs. Peterson a quick hug. Once she was gone, the older woman turned to me, arms crossed. Isabel never told you, did she? It wasn't really a question. No. And you never bothered to check on her after you broke her heart. I didn't have an answer for that. She tried, you know. Called your office dozens of times when she found out she was pregnant. Your assistants blocked her. She even came to your building once, but security wouldn't let her up. Said you were in meetings all day. Each word was a knife, sliding cleanly between my ribs. I remembered those days. I'd instructed Margaret to screen all personal calls. I was in the middle of a major acquisition. I couldn't afford distractions. I didn't know, I said quietly. But that's not an excuse. Mrs. Peterson's expression softened slightly. No, it's not. But that little girl in there, she deserves better than an absent father. So you decide right now, are you in or are you out? Because if you're just going to disappear again, I'd rather you do it before she gets her hopes up. The question hung in the morning air between us. Was I in or was I out? Could I make room in my carefully constructed life for this unexpected child? For reconnecting with the woman whose heart I'd broken? Or would I retreat back to the safe, sterile world of numbers and achievements I'd built for myself? I'm in, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I want to know my daughter. Mrs. Peterson studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. 3 o'clock. Don't be late. And bring something other than spreadsheets to talk about. That girl's got more to her than numbers. As I drove back to Boston, the sun now fully risen over the city, I realized I was heading toward a future I couldn't calculate or control. For the first time in a decade, I was venturing into the unknown without a plan, without data, without certainty. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. I spent the morning in a daze, walking the halls of TechVision like a ghost. Employees nodded respectfully as I passed, their expressions shifting to confusion when I absently nodded back. Alexander Reed didn't engage in casual acknowledgments. Alexander Reed was focused, determined, unapproachable. Except today, Alexander Reed was none of those things. By noon, I'd canceled 3 meetings, apologized to Margaret for my distraction, and locked myself in my office to think. The whiteboard solution Sophia had created was already being implemented by our engineering team. They were ecstatic, calling it a breakthrough. No one had asked where it came from. They assumed it was mine. 3 o'clock approached with alarming speed. I changed into the spare clothes I kept at the office, trading my formal suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. More approachable, less CEO. Still, as I drove back to Cambridge, I felt woefully unprepared. What did one talk about with a 9-year-old genius who happened to be your daughter? What did she like besides mathematics? Did she have friends? Hobbies? Favorite foods? The realization that I knew nothing about her life was a hollowness expanding inside me. Mrs. Peterson answered the door with a curt nod, her earlier hostility tempered but not gone. She's waiting in the kitchen. Hasn't stopped talking about you all day. The accusation was clear in her tone. Don't disappoint her. The Peterson home was warm, lived in, with books stacked on side tables and a cat dozing on a sunny windowsill. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, her curly hair now pulled back in a messy bun. She looked up when I entered, a hesitant smile forming. You came back, she said, as if she'd been half expecting me to vanish. I promised I would. I set down the paper bag I was carrying. I brought sandwiches from Darwin's. Mrs. Peterson mentioned it was your favorite place. Sophia's eyes widened. You got the Huron Avenue with extra pickles? I nodded, oddly pleased that I'd gotten something right. And chocolate chip cookies. Though Mrs. Peterson says you have to eat the sandwich first. Mrs. Peterson harumphed from the doorway, but left us alone, retreating to another part of the house where I could hear the low murmur of a television. I asked Sophia's name properly this time, letting her tell me about herself rather than interrogating her. She was surprisingly forthcoming, speaking with the unfiltered honesty of a child. She was in 5th grade, but taking high school math and science courses through a special program at a local private school. She played violin adequately and soccer terribly. She had 2 best friends, Zoe and Lucas, who knew nothing about her mathematical abilities because she didn't want to be even more of a weirdo. Mom says being smart isn't weird, she said around a bite of sandwich. But Mom is smart too, so she has to say that. I smiled. Your mom is more than smart. She's brilliant. One of the most innovative thinkers I've ever known. Sophia studied me curiously. Did you love her? The directness of the question caught me off guard. Yes, I said after a moment. Very much. Then why did you leave? How to explain ambition, obsession, and self-destruction to a child? Even one as precocious as Sophia? I made a mistake, I said finally. I thought my work was the most important thing in the world. I was wrong. She seemed to accept this, nodding thoughtfully as she finished her sandwich. Then she pointed to one of her textbooks. Mom said your systems had a logic flaw. She used to fix things quietly. She said you were too proud to ask for help. I winced. That sounded exactly like Isabel. She was right. About a lot of things. She still follows your work, Sophia said, matter-of-factly. She has alerts set up for news about Tech Vision. She pretends she doesn't care, but whenever there's a big announcement, she gets all quiet and reads everything. My heart did something complicated in my chest. Does she? Was all I could manage. Sophia nodded, then abruptly changed the subject. Do you want to see what I'm working on now? It's a modification of the Riemann hypothesis. Mom says it's too advanced, but I think I found a pattern. For the next hour, Sophia showed me what she'd done, how she'd reversed an algorithm I'd spent years perfecting and made it better. My pride bristled for a second, but then melted into something humbler. I wasn't just looking at brilliance. I was looking at inheritance. This wasn't just genius. This was legacy. We spent hours talking about math, school, books she loved. She showed me her room at the Peterson house, where she was staying while Isabel was away. It was modest but comfortable, with bookshelves overflowing and star charts on the walls. A violin case sat in one corner, next to a soccer ball that looked brand new. Our real house is nicer, she assured me. Mom teaches at Harvard now. We have an apartment near the square. I have my own little office there. Mom says I'm the only kid in Cambridge with a dedicated workspace. I tried to imagine Isabel as a professor, guiding students through complex mathematical concepts with the same patience and insight she'd once shown me. It fit her. She'd always been a natural teacher. What does your mom tell you about me? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me all afternoon. Sophia considered this, her expression serious. Not much. Just that you were very smart and very ambitious. That you helped create some important technology. That you weren't ready to be a dad. She paused. She doesn't say bad things about you, if that's what you're asking. She just doesn't say much at all. I was shocked by how natural it felt. How Sophia made space for me in her world with gentle curiosity, not resentment. And yet, underneath every smile was that question echoing in the silence. Where were you all this time? As evening approached, Sophia's energy began to flag. Mrs. Peterson appeared with a gentle reminder about homework and bedtime routines. I stood to leave, suddenly reluctant to end our time together. Will you come back tomorrow? Sophia asked, a yawn betraying her fatigue despite her attempt to seem nonchalant. I'd like to, I said, looking to Mrs. Peterson for permission. But your mom comes home tomorrow. I should probably talk to her first. Sophia's face fell slightly. She's going to be mad. Probably, I agreed. But that's between your mom and me. Not your fault. She nodded, then did something unexpected. She hugged me. A quick, awkward embrace that was over almost before I registered it had happened. Thanks for the sandwich, she said, already backing away, suddenly shy. And for not being mad about the breaking in thing. I laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Let's agree that's a one-time adventure, okay? Next time you want to fix my algorithms, maybe just call first. She grinned, the gap where a baby tooth was missing making her look younger than the mathematical prodigy I'd spent the afternoon with. Deal. As I drove back to Boston, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky, I found myself making plans, rearranging mental calendars, reprioritizing. Tomorrow, I would talk to Isabel. Tomorrow, everything would change. For the first time in years, the prospect of an unplanned disruption to my carefully ordered existence didn't fill me with dread. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in so long I barely recognized it. Hope. I found Isabel's number that night. It wasn't difficult. Harvard's faculty directory was public, her office hours and contact information listed neatly beneath a professional headshot. Professor Isabel Ramirez, Department of Applied Mathematics. The photo showed her much as I remembered. Those same intelligent eyes, the same confident half-smile. A few more lines around her eyes perhaps, her curls shorter than they had been, but essentially unchanged. My finger hovered over the call button for nearly an hour before I finally pressed it. My hands trembled as the phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up, equal parts relieved and disappointed, when she answered. Hello. Her voice, slightly distorted by what sounded like airport noise in the background, was exactly as I remembered it. Low, slightly husky, with the faintest trace of her parents' New Mexican accent that emerged when she was tired. There was a long pause. I didn't even have to introduce myself. You found her, she said softly, no question in her tone. Yes, I whispered, and I realized I lost more than I ever knew I had. The background noise on her end faded, as if she'd moved to a quieter location. Where is she now? Safe. With Mrs. Peterson. I took her home this morning after she visited my office. A short, strained laugh. Visited. That's one way to put it. I just got a very concerned call from campus security about my badge being used while I'm registered as out of state. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though it wasn't clear what exactly I was apologizing for. The security breach? The decade of absence? All of it. It's not your fault, Isabel said, her voice carefully neutral. You didn't know. But I should have, I insisted. I should have returned your calls. I should have, Alex. She cut me off, my name on her lips, sending an unexpected jolt through me. Can we not do this over the phone? I'm at O'Hare waiting for my connection. I'll be back in Boston by 9 tomorrow morning. Of course, I agreed quickly. Would it be all right if I met you? To talk properly? There was a hesitation, during which I could imagine her weighing the pros and cons with that methodical mind I'd once known so well. Fine. Darwin's on Cambridge Street. 10 o'clock. I'll be there. I paused, wanting to say more, but not knowing where to begin. Isabel, she's amazing. Another pause, longer this time. Yes, she said finally, her voice softening. She is. Then, more formally, I have to board. Tomorrow. The line went dead. I slept poorly, my dreams a jumble of equations and a small girl with my eyes and Isabel's smile, who kept running just ahead of me, always out of reach. I woke at dawn, restless and anxious, and spent 2 hours answering emails I'd neglected the day before. By 8, I'd called Margaret to clear my schedule for the day. Family emergency, I'd said, the words foreign on my tongue, and was driving to Cambridge far too early for our meeting. I arrived at Darwin's at 9:15, ordered coffee, and took a table in the back corner where I could watch the door. The cafe was busy with students and professors, laptops open, conversations flowing around me in a comforting background hum. I'd forgotten this aspect of Cambridge, the energy, the intellectual buzz that was so different from the sterile corporate environment I'd created at TechVision. I saw her the moment she walked in at 9:52. Her hair was windblown from the spring breeze, her cheeks slightly flushed. She wore jeans and a simple blue blouse under a leather jacket, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from overnight travel, but still vibrant, still Isabel. My heart stuttered in my chest. She spotted me immediately, nodding once in acknowledgement before going to the counter to order. I watched as she chatted easily with the barista, who clearly knew her as a regular. The easy smile she gave him was a reminder of all I had missed, all the daily moments of her life that had gone on without me. When she sat across from me, setting down her coffee and a blueberry muffin, I was struck by how surreal it felt. 10 years of silence, and now here we were, 2 feet apart in a crowded cafe. You look well, she said, her eyes taking me in with that analytical gaze I remembered. Success agrees with you. You look tired, I replied, then winced at my lack of tact. I mean from your flight. Not. A small smile tugged at her lips. I know what you meant. Conference ran late, flights were delayed. Standard academic chaos. She tore a piece from her muffin but didn't eat it. So, you've met our daughter. Our daughter. The words hit me with physical force. Yes, she's extraordinary. She broke into your office to solve an equation, Isabel said, but there was a hint of pride beneath her exasperation. Actually, she broke in using your old badge, which apparently still works despite our supposedly state-of-the-art security system. I tried for a light tone, rewarded with another small smile. Some systems never fully purge old data, she said, and we both knew she wasn't just talking about security badges. We talked until dawn. There was pain. There were long silences. I told her about meeting Sophia, about their afternoon together. She told me about the pregnancy, about her attempts to reach me, about eventually giving up and building a life without me. She'd moved back to Arizona initially, had Sophia with her parents' support, then accepted a postdoc at Cornell before eventually returning to Boston for the Harvard position 3 years ago. Did you ever think about trying again? To tell me. I asked. She studied me, her coffee long gone cold. Every time TechVision made headlines. Every time Sophia asked about you. Every time she solved a problem in that particular way that reminded me so much of you. She shook her head. But what would I have said? Remember me? The woman you ghosted a decade ago? Surprise, you're a father? I would have deserved it, I admitted. I was terrible to you, Isabel. Not just at the end, but for months before that. I was so caught up in what I was building that I didn't see what I was losing. You made your choice, she said simply. I respected it, even when it broke my heart. I had to protect myself, and then I had to protect her. From me. The thought was painful, but not unfair. From disappointment, she clarified. From a father who might drift in and out of her life whenever it was convenient for him. From thinking she wasn't important enough to stay for. There was no anger in her voice, only the quiet ache of two people who once loved each other deeply, trying to understand the distance that time had carved between them. I hadn't expected her calmness. I'd prepared for rage, for accusation. This rational, measured discussion was so much harder to face. I don't want to be that person anymore, I said finally. The one who puts work above everything else. Who misses what matters. People don't change overnight, Alex. I know, but they can change. You taught me that once. She looked out the window, where Cambridge was fully awake now, students hurrying to morning classes, professors carrying coffee cups and lecture notes. What exactly are you asking for here? I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't deserve it yet. But I asked for a second chance. Not as a lover, not even as a partner, but as a father. I want to know Sophia. To be part of her life, if you'll allow it. Not just dropping in when it's convenient. Really being there. Isabel studied me, the mathematician's gaze that could always see straight through my defenses. She's smart, she said finally, but she's still a child. Don't just show up now. Stay? Mean it. I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I will. She has school 3 days a week. The specialized program meets on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She's free Tuesday and Thursday afternoons and weekends. Isabel spoke carefully, as if testing each word before releasing it. You could start with dinner. Once a week. See how it goes. It was more than I had any right to expect. Thank you. She shook her head. Don't thank me. This isn't for you. It's for her. She deserves to know her father, even if that father isn't who I hoped he would be. The words stung, but they weren't meant to wound, only to state facts as Isabel saw them. Always the scientist, observing reality without embellishment. What do we tell her? About why I wasn't there before. Isabel considered this. The truth, that I tried to tell you about her, but you were unreachable. That you didn't know until now. That you want to be part of her life going forward. She met my eyes directly. But you have to mean it, Alex. No false promises. No showing up for a few dinners, and then disappearing when work gets busy. She's already making calculations about you in that head of hers. Forming hypotheses. Gathering data. I smiled despite myself. Like mother, like daughter. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You have no idea. As we parted outside the cafe, the spring sun warm against our faces, Isabel paused. She has your intensity, your focus, but she also has something you lost somewhere along the way. What's that? Wonder, Isabel said simply. Don't take that from her. Don't turn everything into a problem to be solved or a milestone to be reached. I nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. Don't make her like you. Thursday, Isabel said. 6 o'clock. You can pick her up from our apartment. She wrote the address on a napkin, though I already knew it from taking Sophia to Mrs. Peterson's. Don't be late. And I knew, with more certainty than any quarterly forecast, that I wouldn't be. Weeks turned into months. Spring blossomed into summer, the Charles River dotted with sailboats and kayaks, Harvard Square alive with tourists and street performers. I restructured my schedule, delegated more, let go of control in ways that would have been unthinkable to me a year earlier. It was painful at first, like unlearning how to breathe. My executive team was stunned when I announced I'd be leaving the office by 5 on Thursdays and taking half-days on Saturdays. The board was concerned when I started declining international speaking engagements that would take me away for more than 2 days. But slowly, my priorities began to shift. Thursday dinners with Sophia became the fixed point around which my week revolved. We started with simple outings: pizza at Pinocchio's, her favorite, or burgers at Mr. Bartley's, where she delighted in the ridiculously named menu items. Gradually, we expanded our repertoire. The Museum of Science, where she knew more than the tour guides about certain exhibits. The aquarium, where she spent an hour watching the octopus with intense concentration before explaining to me how their distributed brain structure made them ideal models for certain types of AI architecture. By midsummer, I was picking Sophia up from school twice a week. The other parents in the carpool line eyed me curiously at first, the CEO in the Tesla, awkwardly making small talk about school projects and summer reading lists. But Sophia took it in stride, introducing me simply as my dad, without explanation or fanfare. On the surface, being a father seemed straightforward: show up, listen, provide. But the reality was infinitely more complex. I was learning a new language, one of childhood anxieties and joys that had no direct translation to the world I'd inhabited for so long. When Sophia came to me worried about a friendship that was changing as her friend developed new interests, no quarterly report had prepared me with the right response. When she melted down over a math competition where she'd made a simple calculation error that cost her the win, my usual performance metrics offered no comfort. I found myself calling Isabel more often than either of us had anticipated, seeking her guidance on navigating these unfamiliar waters. Our conversations, initially terse and purely logistical, gradually softened. I learned about Sophia's routines, her allergies, strawberries, mild, her sleep habits, restless before tests, her tendency to hyper-focus on projects to the exclusion of everything else. "She gets that from you," Isabel remarked one evening when I called to ask if it was normal for Sophia to have spent 6 hours straight building a complex Rube Goldberg machine in my living room. "I was going to say she gets it from you," I countered, remembering how Isabel used to lose entire weekends to mathematical proofs, emerging bleary-eyed but triumphant. Her laugh, soft and surprised through the phone, stirred something I'd long buried. By August, the three of us had established a cautious co-parenting rhythm. Sunday brunches at Tat Bakery became a tradition, the three of us sharing pastries and weekend plans. It wasn't a reconciliation. The wounds were too deep, the distance too vast for that. But it was a truce, a shared dedication to the brilliant child we'd created. My home began to change too. The sparse, minimalist Beacon Hill townhouse that had been featured in Boston Magazine's executive spaces slowly transformed. A bedroom that had been a home office became Sophia's space for the nights she stayed with me. Bookshelves that had held business biographies and tech manuals now made room for young adult novels and books on astronomy. My refrigerator, once empty save for protein shakes and takeout containers, now stocked Sophia's favorite snacks and ingredients for the simple meals I was learning to cook under her critical tutelage. "You're burning the garlic," she'd inform me matter-of-factly, her nose wrinkled in disapproval. "Mom says that's the cardinal sin of cooking." These casual mentions of Isabel became my window into their daily life, the routines and inside jokes they shared. Each one was a reminder of all I had missed, but also an invitation into their world. One Saturday in late August, Sophia brought in another math problem. We'd settled into a pattern where she'd bring challenging equations or coding puzzles, and we'd work through them together. This one was particularly thorny, a complex optimization problem related to her school's robotics project. I sat beside her at my dining table, now permanently cluttered with her homework and projects, scratching my head as she walked me through her approach. "You're going to surpass me," I joked, watching her solve a problem that would have taken me twice as long. She smirked, that familiar half-smile that was pure Isabel. Already did. And it didn't sting, it filled me with pride. Because for the first time, I wasn't building a legacy in boardrooms, I was building it at home. The company survived without me micromanaging it. In fact, TechVision stock had risen steadily over the summer. Our new quantum computing architecture, the one Sophia had corrected, attracting major investment. My executive team stepped up, making decisions I would have previously insisted on controlling. Projects progressed. Deadlines were met. The world continued to turn without Alexander Reed at the helm 24/7. My life, however, had begun to truly live. I felt it most acutely in the small moments. Helping Sophia with her science fair project, the two of us hunched over her laptop until midnight, giddy with exhaustion and the thrill of getting the simulation to finally work. Teaching her to swim at the community pool, her initial terror giving way to determination as she mastered each stroke. Sitting in the audience at her first violin recital, where she played with technical precision, if not passion, my chest tight with an emotion I couldn't name. Sometimes, Isabel would join us for these milestones. We'd stand awkwardly at opposite ends of the room at school events, then gradually drift closer, sharing observations and quiet laughs at the chaos of elementary school performances. We'd exchange glances over Sophia's head when she said something particularly precocious or absurd. We'd share quiet smiles, like two people watching a sunrise they thought they'd never see again. She needs new soccer cleats, Isabel mentioned one Sunday as Sophia ran ahead of us toward the bakery. She's grown an inch this summer. I can take her shopping next weekend, I offered, making a mental note. Isabel nodded, then hesitated. You're different with her than I expected. How so? More patient. Less CEO-like. She smiled slightly. You don't try to optimize her childhood for maximum achievement. I considered this as we watched Sophia chat animatedly with the bakery owner, who always saved her favorite cardamom bun. I'm learning, I said finally. From both of you. In September, as the leaves began to turn and Sophia started a new school year, Isabel called me on a Tuesday night. Unusual, as our communications typically revolved around Sophia's schedule. There's a faculty dinner this Friday, she said without preamble. Sophia usually stays with Mrs. Peterson, but she's visiting her daughter in Providence this weekend. She can stay with me, I said immediately. We'll make it a movie night. Actually, Isabel paused, and I could almost see her weighing her words carefully. I was wondering if you'd like to come to the dinner. As my plus one, my heart did something complicated in my chest. As Sophia's father, she clarified quickly. My department chair keeps asking to meet you. Apparently, Sophia has mentioned you enough times to pique his curiosity. Of course, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I'd be happy to. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was just dinner, just two parents sharing a social obligation. But as I hung up, I found myself smiling at the ceiling like a teenager. That Friday, as I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I caught sight of a family photo Sophia had placed on my dresser. The three of us at the Museum of Science, Sophia in the middle, Isabel and I on either side, all smiling. Not a traditional family, not yet whole, but connected, trying. As Sophia leaned against my shoulder that evening, working through one last homework problem. Before I left to pick up Isabel, I realized this was the formula I had been searching for all along. Not the elegant mathematical solutions that had built my empire, not the complex algorithms that had made me wealthy beyond imagination, but this, the messy, imperfect, beautiful equation of family, of second chances, of learning, finally, what truly mattered.